Compassion Speaks, where we give a voice to the community. I'm your host, Stephanie Player, and today on our show we have Commander David Sargent with the Pinetop Lakeside Police Department. Welcome.
How are you, Stephanie?
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having us.
I'm so excited to have you on the show because on this particular show we are going to put a spotlight on domestic violence, and this is October. It's Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and so I'm glad that you were able to come because I really want to share with our viewers some information on domestic violence to hopefully shed some light on the topic and maybe help them to reach out. Should they be in that situation, they can reach out for help and know what their rights are as well in that circumstance. So maybe we could start with some of the red flags and warning signs of an abusive situation. What is your experience with that?
Well, situations in the home, you know, over the years the laws have changed because because we've seen an increase in violence inside the home. And what was acceptable in the home 50 years ago is not acceptable in the home anymore. There's all sorts of warning signs. They go across all economic levels. It's not just the poor, it's not just the rich. It affects and it touches everybody. Right. A lot of people think that drugs and alcohol are the impetus to domestic violence. They just really aren't. I mean, in a lot of situations, drugs and alcohol will be a catalyst, or it certainly doesn't help the situation, but it's not the cause and it's not the core. So some of the things that we see in law enforcement is that people during the struggles of life and in the trials that they face in life will start to become frustrated, and instead of sitting down and communicating, I mean, when we're talking about a law enforcement operation, communication's critical. If we don't have communications, everything can fall apart. And in a home, in a marriage, or in a relationship, the communication is paramount. It's critical. And so usually what happens is the communication starts breaking down, and maybe people don't recognize that right away, but now they're faced with heavy burdens, and because they're not communicating and talking through those things with one another, then we hit a point where we explode. And usually this happens with people who grew up in homes where there were explosive relationships in homes.
Right.
Usually you are you know, a lot of us, in a way, are products of our environment, but we also always have a choice in what our reaction to what is done to us or what it is that we hear. Ultimately, we control what our reaction is.
Exactly.
So some people can come out of abusive situations and figure that out and end that cycle of abuse that's been going on in their family and home for generations. And some people just don't recognize that yet, and the light bulb's not gone on. So, you know, the first few years of marriage might be really great, but then we have our first trial. And that's what life is full of obstacles and stumbling blocks. And so when we yoke ourselves with a person that we want at that altar, or at the, you know, before the justice of the peace, or wherever it is that we go to make that promise to one another, everything's good and everything's great, and we look at this future that's just bright, and when the brightness of that future doesn't happen just the way we want it, or something comes in, sickness of a child, sickness of a spouse, a loss of a job, these heavy stressors in life, then things start to build and they start to mount. And if we're not talking with one another and we're not communicating back and forth, then those things can turn into explosive situations. We end up having, usually it starts out with emotional abuse or verbal abuse or isolating from one another, or isolating what it is that our companion's doing. I know that you've been out to the academy, and we teach domestic violence out at the academy, and one of the biggest frustrating things with me when I go to a domestic violence situation is that you know, and we'll be truthful here, most of these are men acting against women. And most men see themselves as the king of the castle, and that's all fine and dandy, but if we're the king of the castle, how come we're not treating our queen like a queen? And that's when it kind of starts to go sideways, is when the treatment back and forth of one another is not what it should be.
Right.
Then we end up after those other types of non-physical abuse, sometimes that escalates and it becomes a physical abuse. And it just starts as a smack or a slap, or that was just a little bit more than a love pat. You know what I'm talking?
Right.
And the problem with that is that if the woman and the man in the relationship don't see that and don't recognize it and do something right then to stop and to say, hey, wait a minute, let's back away from this and evaluate this because we don't want this to happen again. If there's none of that thought, if there's none of that conversation, then what happens is after that slap, then there's a, oh, I'm sorry, and we make up and we go into what's called a honeymoon phase.
Right.
And then when the next stressor comes along, it starts to boil again, and then the next assault is more significant and it's more severe.
Right.
And in the state of Arizona and in most of the states of the union now, because of the way that domestic violence has evolved, because of the way that things have unfolded, we'll go to a domestic violence situation sometimes and a woman has just been beaten. I mean, it's obvious that she's been beaten. And as soon as we put the handcuffs on the husband, they're on our back trying to claw and bite and beat us up because we're going to take the husband away for assaulting her. Those are some of the extreme things that I've seen, but it's happened to me half a dozen times in my career. The other thing that we see is the woman in a cry for help, calls the police to come to the house because she doesn't know how else to deal with this. And if you've got a guy that's twice your size and has been making threats, and this is someone that you saw yourself as loving, that's a difficult call to make. And once they make that call, they start almost immediately regretting it when we get on scene, not because we're treating her unfairly or him unfairly. We evaluate the evidence that's there, and then we've got to take action. Unfortunately, for women who are there, they don't have to be a victim in a crime. If we show up especially on cases of domestic violence, and there's been an assault, and there's evidence of an assault, then there's usually a physical custodial arrest.
Right.
Because if we sit down and even talk to them for 10 or 15 minutes or even a half hour, make sure everything's okay, and we walk away from that over and over and over again, the assault gets worse to the point where now we're maiming people and even killing people. And so that's why now in most of the states across the union, you cannot do that. And if you do, then the result is that there's a custodial physical arrest. And the primary purpose for that custodial arrest is to separate those parties so that there can be a cooling down period. Now people say, well, why don't you just have him go over to his friend's house? Well, we've tried that. And then they go over to the friend's house, they start drinking, or go over to the friend's house and decide, well, I just wanted to get one more word in.
Well, and I find it interesting too on some of the things that you just mentioned about the individuals that are seeking this help. They don't necessarily realize what is going to happen down the road. They are crying out for help. They're calling law enforcement, which is the right thing to do. That's our message. This is against the law for someone to assault you. No one should ever put their hands on you. So you've done the right thing. But everything starts kind of coming to a point of realization for them.
Sure.
As they see that maybe this is the person that also helps to financially support the household. So what's going to happen now that they're going to jail? And also, how is that going to escalate once he's released from jail? What are his feelings going to be now that he's been arrested?
Sure.
And I was a part of the process. There's a lot of guilt and fear too that I think go into that.
And there's a social stigma to that well, I don't even want to call the police because what will the neighbors think?
Right.
Or what will my family think? The problem with that thinking and the problem with going down those is that if you're in imminent jeopardy at the time, you're in jeopardy at the time. And so that's why that call is usually made. I think that looking now that we've had some time to work together with one another at the Safe House and with the Police Academy, probably more than any other call for service, domestic violence is reviewed and looked at, and how do we enhance that, and how do we make sure that people get information in the community that allows them to seek counseling, that allows them to try to improve that relationship. The bottom line is that two people that are involved have to de-escalate themselves and realize that there's an issue here and we have to work through it. Because you can lead a horse to water all day long, but you cannot make that horse drink the water.
Oh, that's
and
it.
so the realization needs to come from them. And on the other side of that, I do know of situations where that call was made, and because the call was made, they were able to get some intervention there, and now the relationship's a lot better than it was.
Right.
And that actually happens frequently.
That's
It's
awesome.
just, who are the adults at the table?
Right.
When aggressive driving on the highway, that's sometimes adults that are acting like juveniles, really.
Yeah.
And when we pull over and start talking to these people, we think, what is going on? And a lot of times when we go into the house and see some of the things that people are arguing about, it's like, come on, guys, we need to step back and grow up and take some responsibility
Right.
for
Well,
what
yeah.
it is that we're doing.
That's exactly it. There has to be accountability for your actions as part of being an adult and being able to seek help and resources whenever you need them, and know that that's what those resources are there for too,
They
to
are.
be able to take advantage of that path to correct any issues that you have within your life or within a spouse's life, so that way you can hopefully work through those issues and
Yeah, to provide
come
you the
out better
tools
on
to
the other
allow
side.
you to correct those things. That's very empowering when you can correct and turn your life around for the
Right.
better.
Right, awesome. Thank you so much for
You bet.
coming and joining us
Thank you for
today.
having us here.
We appreciate you coming and talking today. And you guys stay tuned. We'll be right back with Abby Joplin from the Safe House. So can you share a little bit about your experience with that?
When I married him, he was a little bit anger management issue, needed help, but I thought because we were very young in our early 20s that he would grow out of it. Having families, a lot of people grow out of it and stuff, and he never did. And 10 years into a marriage and a lot of abuse of being thrown around and being in the hospital a lot, and with 3 small children, I thought it was time to leave. And I put 2,500 miles between him and I and started over.
And where are you at today?
Today, I have my 3 children, 2 stepchildren, 8 grandchildren. I have 25 years at Motorola. I am retired from Motorola. I now have my art business. I have an 80-acre ranch and a wonderful husband I've had for 15 years that understands all my ups and downs and issues, and same thing with my own children.
Have you ever in your life been impacted directly or indirectly by domestic violence?
Yes, I have. I have been affected directly by it. My ex-husband was abusive. It started out just during arguments. I'd get a slap on the face, that type of thing. And then one night it got really bad. He ended up taking me by the throat, slamming me against the door, and then slamming me on the floor and kicking me. And that was the point where I was like, okay, this is done. I'm done with it. So I was very lucky to get out and get away from him, and I have a whole different life now.
So where are you today? What's going on in your life?
Well, I have a great man. He is absolutely wonderful. He spoils me, and he's just amazing. Nothing like that. I never have the fear that he will do anything like that, which is really nice. It took a while to get to that point. You are always afraid that that's going to happen again, especially when you get into an argument with somebody. And now I have healed from it, and I'm much better off. So
Happy. What do you think about domestic violence?
I think it should be taken seriously. Children shouldn't have to go through that,
How do you think it impacts children that witness?
I think it might make them grow up to think it's either okay or they just will grow up with violence or hate, If they grow up seeing it, they might just do it or think it's okay, or it might go opposite, they might never want to be that way. Or
Do you think it's good that everybody is aware of domestic violence, knowing that it's going on, or should it only be the people who are experiencing it?
No, everybody should know. Everyone, because even if you're not impacted by it and you see it going on in a neighbor's house or something like that, you should call and let someone know. Because you never know, some women or men or children are too scared to call and let someone else know about it. So I think other people should be aware and know that they need to report things like that if they see it.
Welcome back to Compassion Speaks. Joining us now is Abby Joplin, the Native American Community Advocate for the White Mountain Safe House. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. We work alongside together and have for several years now.
Yes.
And I thought it would be awesome to have you on the show to talk about the Safe House, to talk about domestic violence awareness, and talk about the program that you run as well. So I guess let's start off with what does the White Mountain Safe House do? What can you tell our viewers about it?
The White Mountain Safe House is a domestic violence shelter for women and children. We are there to provide resources as well. You don't have to be a resident to seek shelter, but we do provide resources if you call and need help finding other shelters. We can do that as well.
So yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. We have a 24-hour hotline.
Yes.
People can call in any time of day, night, throughout the year. We always have an advocate available to answer those calls. And those calls too are 100% confidential. We are strictly there to make sure that the caller is safe or can get safe, whether that means coming into shelter or not, and then go from there on what their circumstances are and how we can best help them on what it is that they need help with.
Yes.
So I guess let's, with it being October, and October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, we're always looking for ways to get the community involved in our mission and what it is that we do. So we do have quite a few events that are going to be going off this month. So can you tell me about a couple that we have going on that you are thoroughly involved in?
Sure. First of all, I'd like to tell you what I do as a Native American community advocate with my Stand Strong project.
Okay.
The Stand Strong project was developed by the White Mountain Safe House in 2006, and I worked on the Fort Apache Indian Reservation, as well as other reservations like Navajo Nation if they need me to come and present, the Hopi Reservation, and I speak to them on domestic violence, substance and alcohol abuse, sexual assault, dating violence, and I work close with collaborative partners to make sure that we have a great response system, a team to assist victims on reservations. But what we have for the month of October for domestic violence awareness is we have our walk in White River, the walk in Sibique as well, which will be on the 21st of October of this month, and also on the 23rd in White River. So we look forward to that. After our walks, we do have a little conference for those that are in attendance. So we see that as a way to go out into the community and to be just come together as a reservation and work with collaborative partners to provide resources, and we have educational booths available as well. We also go live on our radio station, which is 88.1 KNNB, to speak and let the public know what domestic violence is. There's a lot of individuals that I feel that think domestic violence is a hit and a punch, but it's not. You know, we have emotional abuse, psychological abuse, and it gives me the opportunity to educate our community on what types of violence are out there.
Right, and as I was just talking about with Commander Sargent, we were explaining how it can start out as verbal and emotional abuse, but it can ultimately escalate to that physical violence. So by being able to identify it early on, whenever it is verbal and emotional and it hasn't quite gotten to that point of being physical, you can break free from it before it escalates into physical harm to you or your children So it's important for people to know what is abuse and what isn't, to be able to ultimately help themselves in situations that they may otherwise not see those signs. We know those red flags and warning
Yes.
signs all too well. Extreme jealousy can be sometimes taken as extreme love for individuals that misread that message, when in fact it's a method of control of that partner, and that's what starts that controlling process with that person. To make sure that they're, not interacting with anybody of the opposite sex. And maybe I don't want you to even have a job because I don't want anybody looking at you. And I don't want you to wear makeup because people will find you attractive and they'll want to get with you. There's so many reasonings behind it, but ultimately it is an abusive behavior to be extremely jealous all the time of what your partner is doing and who they're talking to.
Yes.
So I'm so glad that you guys have 2 events that people can come and attend. And from what I understand, we've had in the past thousands of
Yes.
people attend these walks.
Yes, in the community of Cibecue, we have about 500, and in White River, we have about 1,200 that attend the walks every year.
Oh, that's amazing.
And I love working like you with our police department, our local police department. They have really come and collaborated with the Stand Strong Project and the Safe House in general to really know what services we offer to victims. And I'm very thankful that we have that with all of our police departments in our area.
Yes, we are
So-
very lucky in our community to have that collaboration. I'm always thankful too, considering how it could be and how we hear other communities struggle,
Yes.
to know that even in this small rural mountain community that we live in, we do have a lot of collective agencies that want to work together to help to solve this issue here locally. But it does take a community. We can't do it ourselves. The police department can't do it all on their own. We all have to work together, and that involves individuals themselves in the community too, to take a stand and stand with us, stand with law enforcement to say, this isn't acceptable. I don't want it in my community, and I'm standing against this.
Yes.
I'm standing to support survivors and make sure that we have systems set up to help these people in times of need. And we do have another walk too, our second annual this year of the Walk in Her Shoes event. We held it last year at the Pine Top Lakeside Police Department. It was so much fun. We had the police chief and several other walkers from the Community Presbyterian Church participate, and they donned women's heels and walked around the block for a full mile. That was a full mile around the block
wow.
in heels, to help to bring awareness to domestic violence and to be a part of it from a male's perspective as well, to say, I don't live my life this way, and I want to make sure that I'm letting everybody else know this isn't acceptable to treat women this way. And so we are holding that again.
Yes.
And we have more information on our website for those of you who are interested to participate. But again, second annual Walk in Her Shoes event. We will be holding it October 11th at the Blue Ridge High School parking lot right there off the highway. So I am really excited to get that going again and see how many walkers we get. And I'm excited to see the shoes too, to
So
be
am
honest.
I. I'm really excited. It was really fun last year to see that. And I really applaud the men that did walk, because I know I couldn't have done that as well. So
It's hard for me to walk around
I
in
hear
heels,
ya.
let alone someone who's not used to walking in heels
Yes.
ever.
yes.
So we did have some injuries on the field as a result, but they were troopers, and
Yes.
they made it all the way through the full mile, and I too applaud them, because it takes a lot of guts and bravery to do that and stand up with us in that fashion. Keyword fashion to really bring awareness to the issue and take that stance.
Yes.
So what else can we tell our viewers about when it comes to domestic violence? What are some things that we can alert them to about the Safe House and maybe about red flags and warning signs too, and what they should do in those situations?
I think the red flags would be, you have to know within yourself how you should be treated, how you should be talked to as an individual. And like you stated earlier, it starts with like verbal abuse. And if you know that you are spoken to in a way that's not healthy, it could escalate. And that's a red flag. It should be an immediate red flag. And you can call the Safe House if you want to speak to somebody and not necessarily come in, to let them know what you're going through, so we could be that support to say, hey, you're not in this alone. Because some individuals, they don't know where to turn, they don't know what to think, and so they have the Safe House. Our advocates are awesome. They're really there to speak to the callers, and they know their resources. And it doesn't have to be a female. Males are victims as well. So
Right.
we're there for everyone who's a victim.
Exactly. I'm glad you threw that in there too, because we do have male callers that call in. There's such a heightened stigma for male victims to be able to identify that it's abuse, number one, and number two, to even reach out for help. We have served a lot of male victims in the last few years that you and I have been
Yes.
involved, and over the years of the existence of the Safe House. Our primary goal, I think, and it's in our name, is we want people to be safe no matter what. Domestic violence knows no bounds.
Mm-hmm.
It is in every culture, every race, every ethnicity, every socioeconomic background, every gender.
Yes.
It knows no bounds. And we want to serve any and all victims that are affected by this, to help them to transition from victim to survivor, and then ultimately to thriver. That way
Yes.
they don't have to put up with abuse anymore in their lives, and they have that self-confidence to be able to make that decision for themselves. So
Yes.
thank you so much for coming and joining us
Thank
today,
you for inviting
Abby.
me.
It was a pleasure having you. I'm so glad we got to talk about the Stand Strong Project. We'll have the website information at the end of the segment so people can check it out. And I'm just excited to be able to spotlight domestic violence today with
Me
you.
too. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today. Be sure to tune in next month to hear Compassion Speak.